looking at managing our entire site. So the location of our business. A lot of this, if you took Security Plus, you're going to have a lot of this. This will be repeat for you. But like I said, some of you may have taken Security Plus 2 years ago, and you're not going to remember any of that. So we'll go over a lot of this briefly, just as review. So one of the major steps of infrastructure management is implementing some type of IAM, Identity and Access Management. And the purpose of this is so that we have users properly provisioned. Every user has a login and a password. Our hardware is properly provisioned. They have some type of identity management on the maybe like an RFID chip or some kind of certificate on the hardware, and applications are properly identified, and so on. So they have a good list here of every system, that every user and hardware and software that needs to be identified. And this is done so that if we see new hardware, if we see new applications, we know that if they're not properly provisioned, we know that we need to remove those. They could be security threats. Even installing like shadow IT could be a security threat. You could be opening up a license issue where the software that's installed may not have been properly licensed, and now that opens up your company to being sued by the publisher of the software. So part of identity and access management is making sure that when you add a new individual, for example, that you identify that individual, maybe looking at their driver's license or passport, and then providing them a proper login and password. Login, and then they're of course going to put in the password. And then also we want to make sure that when that user leaves the company, that they're properly deprovisioned. And also with hardware, you want to make sure that hardware is deprovisioned as well, and properly. The hardware you want to properly dispose of. You don't want to properly dispose of people, but you want to make sure their accounts are removed, because if their accounts are still there, they're still able to access them remotely from home, and they don't work for you anymore. When it comes to privilege accounts, you make sure only the right people have the passwords, administrators, senior administrators, and then you want as few shared accounts as possible, because it makes it really hard to determine who's responsible for that activity if something goes wrong. There'll be a lot of finger pointing. Now, passwords. Let me bring up the site here, the GRC Haystack, and let me jump down to the question. So take a look at the bottom here where it says, which of the following two passwords is stronger, more secure, and more difficult to crack? And if you think the one that starts with D is the answer, put D in the chat box. If you think the one with P is the answer, put P in the chat box. Thank you. All right, so the point here is that length is more important than the complexity. So when it comes to passwords, it's going to, during a brute force attack, the system will figure this one out before it figures this one out. So length is more important than the complexity when we're looking at the NIST guidance. And so you're seeing more and more companies moving to passphrases. Also, there's single sign-on. If you have a single sign-on system, make sure you employ multi-factor authentication. We're going to go over that in a minute. What single sign-on allows an organization to do is we can have a user can have access to the entire network of systems in the organization to this day. I don't know if the dash goes here or if the dash goes here. I see it both ways on the internet. Or should there be a dash at all? I don't even know. But it makes sense to be the latter one. But the user logs in once, and no matter if these systems are in Detroit or Texas or California, the user can access any other system once they're allowed into the network. So you definitely want to employ multi-factor authentication. And I'll go through this briefly because I'm pretty sure that from comments I heard earlier, it sounds like many of you have seen this before. So when it comes to multi-factor authentication, by the way, did any of you get an English degree in college? Or knows English really well? Like, should the dash go here or should the dash go there? Yeah, same here. was social studies and English were not my study. History wasn't it for me. All right, questions we'll never answer. Yeah, right. It's a difficult language, we know it, but man, yeah, I was definitely a math and science guy. Loved physics for sure. Physics and calculus, my favorite subjects. So with multi-factor authentication, something we know, have, or are. There are additional ones too, like location, time. So there's some other ones as well, but generally we use two-factor authentication where we have something we know, like it's a password or a PIN, and then something we have like a phone or I'll say one-time password device. That every 30 seconds it puts up a different 6 digits. Then there's something you are. This could be an iris scan, a thumbprint, so something that's physically on you. And if we combine two of these, so let's say this user's logging in here and they put in their password, so that's something they know, and they get a 6-digit code sent to their phone, then this would be known as two-factor authentication, because we're going to use something we know and something we have. In case you get a question like this on the exam, one not multi-factor authentication would be using a password, then it asks for a PIN, then it asks for your birthday, then it asks for your mom's maiden name. And so even though it's asking you different prompts to access the system to prove who you are, these are all under something we know. So this is not multi-factor authentication. They have to come from two different authentication types. So two-factor authentication would be know and have, or know and are, or we could do three-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication where you use all three. So if you want to really be secure. Now one other point I want to make is when we're looking at iris scans, what have you guys heard about iris scans versus retinal? Which one's better? Okay, so retinal would be better because this is going to look, the iris scan is just looking at the shape of the eye, but the retinal is going to actually look at the blood vessels. And so the retinal is better, but it's so much better, it can figure out health issues you're having, whether you've got cancer or AIDS or other issues. So because of the system being able to leak health information, you're seeing retinal not used as often because of HIPAA compliance issues. So even though it's better, it's not used as often because of leaking health data. What they call PHI, personal health information, as opposed to PII.